it's always nice to have a pretty lady in studio, because then the guys start behaving. I think the audience also, gets a mehlo. So, Sis Phapano, thank you so much for joining us again. And as much as I'm speaking about your looks and how pretty you are, many people know you for your ferocious authenticity and objectivity in terms of the political landscape in this country, and I think on the continent and globally. So thank you very much for coming back and gracing us with your beauty and your intelligence.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. I've got 7 questions for you here. If you may, I'd like to read through all of them, and then you'll decide on which one you want to start with, and I'll try and be as quiet as I can be.
No, let's have a robust discussion.
Okay. Are you good otherwise?
Oh, I'm superb, thank you.
You happy?
Oh, yes, I am.
Beautiful. So some of the points that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Number 1, Ibrahim Traore, the leader of Burkina Faso, and the idea of democracy versus dictatorship. We're hearing a lot of South Africans today saying maybe we need someone like that. There were similar utterings when Donald Trump took on his first term. I think it might be the reason people like Putin, Xi Jinping, and the like. And your thoughts just around him as a figure, and also democracy versus dictatorship. Your thoughts on the Afrikaner refugees that have moved to America. We've got 49 Afrikaners that have left now, and what you think of that whole story and what's happened. This might be early, but since I've got you here, just to maybe start wrapping our heads around what you project for national elections in 2029. Not the local elections that are coming, but national. And my next point would be linked to this. In who do you think will be the next ANC president after Cyril Ramaphosa? In worrying about succession, who do you think will take over Umkhonto weSizwe after Ubaba Zuma? Do you think we should bring back the Bantu stance, just as a concept? By Bantu stance, I mean splitting the country, to put it in crass terms, on tribal grounds, however we want to design them then. And in the media recently, a lot of American companies have been cutting jobs because of artificial intelligence. 2,000, I think, at Microsoft. I don't know how many hundreds at Google. And it hasn't hit us as yet. We already have our unemployment issues now without AI, automation, robots. But what do you project for the future of our unemployment problems in this country? So it's just those topics from my side. If you've got any other, I'm happy to hear. But we can start wherever you want from there, and I'm happy to read them again if you want.
I think we can start with the first question.
Traore, the boss.
Oh, yes. Look, I think this fascination with a military leader, a strongman, is not unique to Africa. We saw it with Germany and the rise of Hitler. We saw it in Japan. When Japan was very strong, when Japan colonized China and surrounding countries, we also saw it with Napoleon Bonaparte. In Africa, military leaders is not a new thing. I mean, in Nigeria, Ghana, the Sahel region in particular, there has been consistency in terms of coups and military leaders coming in and promising, various new policies and solutions. So Traore is not unique, as I indicated. Look, I think for me there are different ways of looking at this. I think, Africans in particular, they have become onlookers. They have tended to wait for someone to actually come and save them. If you look at South Africa in particular, and that's when the question of the Afrikaners come in. Many South Africans have been very hard on the Afrikaners. They are saying that they're not patriotic. But one of the things that the Afrikaner community did, led by AfriForum, was to say that one death of one farmer is enough. They are saying that crime in, farming towns, in farms, it's enough. And we do not do that as Africans. Black lives or African lives do not matter to us. We do not raise questions when there's mismanagement, when there's corruption. We sit, we observe, and we have discussions. We do not hold our leaders accountable. And what is happening now is that instead of, holding our leaders accountable, instead of having cross-border engagements as Africans, we are instead looking at this man as an option, as an alternative to this mismanagement, to lack of governance. But at the same time, one must also say that there's been a lot of progress in the continent. There's been a lot of progress in Ivory Coast. There's been a lot of progress in Tanzania. There's been a lot of progress in Botswana and many other African countries. But the question is, why do we look at Traore as an alternative? Because the reality is that what we see on social media is not reality.
Wait, you speak about him in particular?
Yes, what we see on social media, what we see on TikTok, what we see on YouTube is not reality. The reality is that you've got millions of women and children who are displaced in Burkina Faso. There's no water, there's no electricity. And the question for me, which is pertinent, and many of us are not asking this question, what is happening to the minerals in Burkina Faso? Where are the minerals of Burkina Faso ending at? The reality is that in the past couple of years, Russia and China in particular have been exploiting Burkina Faso. That's why it's not a coincidence to see Traore in Russia. The other reality is that you have Wagner Group, which has been running this propaganda machinery to ensure that we've got this strong man. Every time you open your phone, every time you go to social media, there is Traore. So we are not looking at these things. I mean, a normal person should be asking, where is this misinformation? Where is this information coming from? Why are we bombarded on a daily basis? And who is doing that? This is not coincidental. And as a communicator, you know that some of these things are not coincidental. We also know that the Wagner Group is very, very strong in Africa, and they thrive where there is chaos. Because what this means is that they are able to extract minerals easily. So that's what has been happening primarily in the Sahel region. And my fear, Penuel, is that there is a humanitarian crisis in Burkina Faso. And no one is talking about that. We're not also talking about 40% of the country that is led by Islamic terrorist groups. So no one is showing some of these things. No one is doing that. But then what happens? It means that women and children can be trafficked. It means that the poorest of the poor are not able to get the aid that they need. So for me, it's an indictment. But of course, from a political side, I'm excited that Africans are starting to ask questions, that Africans are starting, to say that, if there is this perception that this particular leader can do such a thing, it's possible in our own countries. But if you were to compare many of our countries with Burkina Faso, with Niger, with Mali, you would appreciate South Africa, for example. You would appreciate Botswana. You would appreciate the infrastructure that we have, the sanitation, the water, and so forth. But lastly, let me state this. What is amazing is that just last month, the IMF was in Burkina Faso. Yet what do you see on TikTok? What do you see on YouTube? Traore has rejected money from the IMF. Traore has rejected the West. So for me, it's an indictment because the IMF has been to Burkina Faso. And in fact, if you look at these discussions with the IMF for a loan, they started taking place in 2023, a year after Traore took power. But you do not see such things. You then get an impression that governance is a simple thing, that you can have one strong man taking power and tomorrow people will have water, people will have sanitation, people will have food and so forth. What Africa needs, we don't need better dictators. We need better institutions. We need our people to start taking accountability of their own affairs. In South Africa in particular, many of us are just observers. We do not hold our leaders accountable. Consistently so, it's the white minority that is taking our government to court. And they are very, very consistent. And we're not. So I'm just saying that we need to really look at ourselves as Africans. But also, what is also interesting to me is that Burkina Faso recently Traore recently went to meet Putin in Russia. But where is Putin going to? Putin is having engagements with Trump.
That is true.
So
they have a decent relationship.
Oh, yes, they have a decent relationship. Whilst the very Russia and the very China are saying abandon the West. They have close relationships with the West. They trade with the West. But then why do we need to abandon the West so that someone can come in? Because countries outside of Africa, they need Africa to be in a continual state of chaos. It is easy to take our minerals. So you do have new colonizers. You do have China. You do have Russia taking, Africa's minerals. And no one is saying anything about this because, of course, it is not the West. So I think it's important that we start to, have objective conversations and not just look at TikTok and see these videos. AI. AI can produce anything. I mean, just this morning, there were posts that, Traore or the people in Burkina Faso will get free electricity. There's no affordable and there's no, proper access to electricity in Burkina Faso. The same with water. And people are looking at this and they're seeing this fairy tale and they're falling in love with this fairy tale. I think as Africans, let's work with what we have. Let's look at Japan. Let's look at South Korea. Let's look at China, of course. Let's look at all these countries which are advancing. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. The very Saudi Arabia, Middle East countries, they just embraced Donald Trump.
That's correct.
It's not that they are stupid. It's because they understand the economy. The economy is not emotional. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to put our house in order as Africans. We need to start owning industries. That's not what we are doing. As I said, we are just looking for a savior. We are waiting for a Traore. And for me, it's just unfortunate because there is no single man who is coming to save any African country.
Ukhona uPenzo, the single man.
Oh, yeah.
You raise so many things at once. The first thing I want to raise, which is obviously going to upset the ordinary black person, is it almost sounds like you're praising AfriForum and Afrikaners. But you are saying that, look, we should learn from them. As few as the farm murders are in number, they are like, this is too much. And instead of us taking that as a lesson, we're just getting upset. And we almost want them to worry about black deaths when we don't worry about black deaths ourselves. We're not going out saying black people are being murdered, but we get upset when other people speak about their own people and say, look, they're being murdered. So I wanted to highlight that. Number two, you're almost dropping a bombshell which will get you attacks. They are going to send a black woman to come and talk nonsense about our leadership. Traore, we are Traore. Traore is us. Why would you say these things that you're saying? And you're asking pertinent questions. And it's questions that anyone who studied history will know that it only comes out much later. Hitler didn't take over a year, 2 years, and then it came out that this guy is a bad person. It would be much later after selling a lot of dreams. And in a situation where we've had so many leaders, liberators, even in the South African context with the ANC, we'd learn later that there were different wheelings and dealings. And Muammar Gaddafi was killed. Thomas Sankara was killed. You've had many other guys. Here we've had Abokri Sani, Steve Biko, etc. It was weird for me watching Traore take over and how he's being celebrated and nothing's happening. I'm like, this is not normal. So I've already got question marks. And the way my brain works is to ask, who's protecting him? Because I know it's not the African Union. The African Union doesn't protect its own. We would have avenged Gaddafi's death. We would have defended Robert Mugabe and the likes, but it's never been done. then you start wondering, because at a time when I was visiting Russia, some of the soldiers from Burkina Faso and Traore was there at the same time. You know what I mean? Then when this thing came out that he went to visit Russia and they've just signed over some of the mines, I was like, this is a done deal. Now, for people that don't understand, would you argue that that's a bad thing? Because maybe the argument is, look, we're tired of French colonizers. They are not willing to move any bit. We're trying to find better colonizers, neo-colonialists, who maybe see us as more human, give us better terms, allow us to run our country the way we want, as long as they make money. Whereas maybe the French and the Americans and the British, they meddle even in things that we don't want. The Russians are saying, marry how you want. I think Traore is a Muslim himself. Follow your Islamic. We'll just trade and then we'll support militarily and maybe through intelligence. Is that not a better deal? And maybe that's what we should be looking for.
Well, another, you raise pertinent points, but the other interesting point here is the military-industrial complex. What you are also having now, just look at the numbers of the weaponry that is going to the Sahel region. No different to how China is, just last week, China made billions from the aircrafts or from their shares in terms of the armaments that they sold to Pakistan. So what you're having is you're having new powers that are doing what the West has done. They are perfecting it. And what they are telling Africans is that, look, we are your friends. We are not like Americans. We are not like the British. We are not like Europeans in particular.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they are not assisting. The Sahel region is primarily poor. It is not changing, Penuel. So the lived reality is not changing. And the other aspect is Russia can choose any leader. China can choose any leader because it's not a democratic process.
Yeah.
So you could have another Traore, and they could then decide that we want to work with Turkey. I think for me, the most painful thing is that you've got countries like Russia, as I said, China, Turkey, your Saudi Arabia, that have now tentacles in our continent, and we see them as our friends, but they don't look like us. Why do we think that Putin has got interest? Better interest than Trump, than all these Western leaders? They don't look like us. That's why when he's in trouble with the entire Western Europe, he runs to people who look like him. He runs to Donald Trump. He doesn't come to Africa. Africa is only valuable because of its minerals. And I can tell you now, our minerals won't last forever. They are non-renewable. At some point, Russia will not have any interest in Africa. China will not have any interest in Africa. And you can see many countries are moving, many Western countries are moving out of our continent because now you have AI, but over and above that, you've got lab minerals. Just look at what is happening in Botswana. Botswana is struggling to compete with India. The new millennials, those who have money, they don't want blood diamonds. They would rather buy diamonds that are made from labs. And because the previous regime did not diversify its economy, Botswana is in serious trouble. So, we've got all these complexities. And, you hear many people saying, oh, just expropriate. It's our minerals. In the bigger scheme of things, minerals are just not that important. Of course, your electronics, they need minerals, but they are really, they are not the epicenter of development. I mean, we're speaking of, as you were saying, we're speaking of AI. We are not even talking about skills of the future as Africans. Yeah. What are we doing? We want military leaders to come impose themselves on us. Are we even ready? Can we even have this conversation if we have a dictator in South Africa?
We can't.
We can't, because you cannot have a free press. You cannot have a free judiciary. Women will not have rights. And the first people who are going to be affected is going to be women and our rights. The same way that women in the Sahel region do not have the rights that we have and the rights that we enjoy. So I think when people start to fantasize about these leaders, they start to fantasize about Russia, and without looking at things objectively. For me, it's an indictment. We need to start talking about African solutions, as Thabo Mbeki has said. But are those solutions dictatorship? Or is it progress? Is it looking at the institutions that we have, bettering the institutions that we have, doing what AfriForum is doing, building institutions for our people, going back to the townships where young people are dying, where young people are drinking themselves, to death. We are not doing any of these things. And we look at Afrikaners and, we look down on them, we laugh at them. They're building their own institutions. They're not waiting for the ANC government to come and save them. They are saving themselves, even if it means running away to the US.
Do you believe we have any African leaders who are in control? There have been rumors of Paul Kagame also being arguably a puppet for the West. Traore cuts the link with France. Next thing we see Paul Kagame in France. And many people have said he's a proxy for the West in places like the DRC and in other places. If it were to be true, and we find out that Traore maybe is a puppet for, let's call it BRICS interests, Russia, China, etc., the question then becomes who's left? Because many of us have said it seems like Cyril is a proxy for the West. As we record this on the 20th of May, he's meeting with Donald Trump. We don't know what's going to come of that, but he's never really been hostile to capital and foreign capital at that. So in everything you're saying, what I'm taking from it, because someone would say, it sounds like you're protecting the West. And no, you're not protecting the West, but you're saying, don't replace the West just with another colonizer. So then we're left with, we must stand on our own. Do we have any leaders that have that ability to have shown that they're willing to work for their people and not for the interests of other powers out there? Is it even possible?
Look, for me, that type of analysis is disingenuous. First and foremost, Africans don't even trade with each other. That's why Traore went to Russia. He didn't go to any other African country. He didn't give the mineral concession to any African country. He gave them to Russia. So Africans in particular do not even trade with each other.
But isn't that because all the other leaders are serving? So I can't trade with, let's say, as an example, a South Africa that I know, let's say, is a proxy of America.
No.
So if I'm trying to de-link, you might be like, but you're not buying from other black people. You're like, but those black people are selling or they're serving other people's interests. I'd rather, even if it's a Russia, another interest, they're giving me better terms. Because if I go to South Africa, Botswana, etc., it might look like I'm trading with black people and Africans, but I'm not. I'm still trading with the same people.
I think for me, one other aspect which is quite interesting, because in trying to respond to what you've just said, many South Africans would say we are looking for jobs, or they are taking our jobs, or mabahambe. But what I find interesting, and then I try to figure out or attempt to understand, why is our government not vociferous on the issue of Nigerians, on the issue of Zimbabweans, and a few of our people from the continent who are here? And my logical conclusion then becomes because South African businesses are extracting profits from those countries. There is billions that is being, or that have been extracted from the continent.
Correct. Be
it Nigeria, be it Zimbabwe. I mean, if you just take the SADC region, if you go to Lesotho, let's start here. A person who takes a Lesotho citizen in South Africa, who takes money home to Lesotho, that money will come back to South Africa because it's likely to go to ShopRite. It's likely to go to a South African linked bank.
Our multi-choice, our banks. I think Standard Bank is the biggest bank on the continent. Shoprite is the biggest retailer.
Yes. So the money always comes back to South Africa, and it creates our jobs here in South Africa. No different to Zimbabwe. So, I mean, look at the trucks, thousands of trucks that leave South Africa to Zimbabwe, and even the remittance that leaves South Africa and the continent and the globe from Zimbabweans to Zimbabwe. The money comes back to South Africa, because the value chain of the economy is controlled by South African businesses. No different to Botswana, no different to Nigeria. Look at Nigeria now. 100% of the aluminium can industry in Nigeria is owned by a South African company.
Hectic.
It means that of the 200 plus population of Nigeria.
Million.
Yes. Thank you. It means that they are buying or they are using South African products. The same with MultiChoice. MultiChoice has more consumers or more customers in Nigeria than in South Africa, or the SADC region combined. So when you think about that, yes, of course, you'd have to think about issues of safety. But at the same time, the very fact that these countries are not benefiting, from their own value systems. It's our companies. The same with the DRC. There are so many South African mining companies in the DRC.
Correct.
So no one, because we speak remember, the poor and the working class, they are at a micro level.
Correct.
But at a macro level, people are having different conversations because these are issues of trade.
Yes.
What happens when you kick out Nigerians? What happens from the business perspective? But at the same time, I can assure you that I have these conversations with the Nigerian mission in terms of how do they start propagating better? Because you've got thousands of Nigerians who are doing very well in this country. You've got Nigerians who are professionals, who are academics, who are business people, but their voices are not heard because in many instances, you've got this few Nigerians, who are, in terms of the brand, they are not doing justice.
They're tarnishing.
Yes, they're not doing justice to brand Nigeria. But I expect Nigerians to propagate better because it's not even only about South Africa. It's also the globe where Nigerians and primarily Igbos who would go to different countries, what they do. But of course, yes, you do have good Igbos like Chimamanda and many others. So I'm just saying that there are different dynamics when you look at this, but also there's a question of cheap labor, but not necessarily with Nigerians, because you find that Nigerians are entrepreneurs.
Yeah, no, they're not the cheap labor in the restaurants. Yes. Definitely not.
Oh, yes.
But maybe a bouncer here and there, but...
Oh, yeah. yes. And we're not even talking about what do we learn from Nigerians? What do we learn about your Access Bank? What do we learn about... in Nigeria, more than 45% of women are entrepreneurs with no assistance from any government. And if you were to compare them to us, we are primarily products of affirmative action, your Black Economic Empowerment or BBEE. So, this organic production of entrepreneurs, this millionaires. I mean, I once saw one of your shows where your speakers was talking about the hustling mentality of Nigerians. I often see Themba Kwayo in Nigeria, just praising and embracing this entrepreneurial spirit of Nigerians. Of course, at some point, Nigeria was even thriving better than South Africa. And there was a military coup. And, the progress, there was regression. At some point, Nigeria was the leading country in the globe that was pushing against apartheid. Nigeria gave the ANC, the PAC, and many liberation movements millions.
No one knows that.
Oh, no one knows about that.
I've never heard it until today.
Oh, yes.
Nigeria was standing in solidarity with us and supplying us with resources during the struggle.
Especially, it started with Prime Minister Bawela. During his tenure in the 60s, he was the one who even led the exclusion of the apartheid government from the Commonwealth. And then you also had General Obasanjo. In 1978, He then decided, when he took power in the 70s, in 1978, he then phased out BP, British Petroleum, from Nigeria, because at that point, there were sanctions against the apartheid government. But then Britain decided to resurrect its trade relations with apartheid South Africa. What did Obasanjo do? He decided to close down the trade agreement between BP and the Nigerian government. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not doing that?
I want to move on, but before we do, I want to finish off my points earlier that you mentioned about Traore. One of the things you said about him is if he was genuine, he'd be pushing for an African currency, he'd be trading with other African nations. I'd like to think someone like Gaddafi tried, and a Traore watching that, seeing what happened after Gaddafi was killed, would not want to move in that direction. So it would be prudent for him to not move in the same way, as much as we'd like to see it, to be like, well, the last guy who was here who did that was killed and you guys did nothing and life went on. The other thing I wanted to say was we need to hold our government to account. You're very right. And maybe advice I'll give to you is advice that I've given to one of the voices of Zimbabwe, Rutendo Matinyarare. In trying to speak to ordinary South Africans, not the government or whoever else, we need to be very sensitive about their departure point, especially if you want them to buy into what you're saying. So when you almost antagonize them, where's your humanity when you won't let Zimbabwean women use the hospital? They get very defensive and very angry and you become a problem. Versus trying the departure point of understanding where they come from and winning them over to explain. Wutiabo Mama, the same way you left rural KZN, rural Eastern Cape. They still won't like the narrative. But you're just trying to get them to understand that some of these people, where they come from, they're also struggling like us. The difference is that we were separated by British borders. These are not even ours. So, into ngicelayo mama is while you're shouting at them, yes, akumele ngabala.
No, but you can't say I'm shouting.
And, no, I'm just making an example.
And maybe let me clarify something. You know, I led the ANC, and I have always been an activist. And throughout my life, I have fought for the poorest of the poor. So the engagement was at another level. Of course, you cannot blame poor people. Of course, you cannot blame people who are primarily dependent or who have been made to be dependent on social ground. Yeah. Because that's what they know. Yes. But the angle that the angle of our discussion has been about Traore, this aspect of Pan-Africanism and so forth. So that's where I'm coming from. So if we have to deduce the discussion to a micro level, then one can speak to that, because the poor people, the working class, the middle class and so forth, they see things differently. Because
they stand in the queue there with foreigners that are not meant to be here. And when you say things like your humanity, it's like, but my aunt died in a queue where there were Zimbabweans that shouldn't have been here. So where's your humanity for my grandmother? And it sounds like we're antagonizing them. So I'm just saying, but to yourself and others, because these things become clips, sound bites, and then you get attacked. And we need to protect the people that are raising these issues, because they're not the ones that created these problems. We need to focus very much on the people that created the problems. And when we explain to the ordinary person why this is a problem, we mustn't disregard their cries of abahambe. We don't want Nigerians here.
It's mainly politicians who use some of these issues to instigate,
of course,
communities.
Of course.
They do not come with answers, because we know the very politicians who say mabahambe, they fraternize with Zimbabweans, they even give them tenders. But in broad daylight, they say mabahambe.
Sure.
But also one last thing. With Zimbabwe in particular, you know, Zimbabwe is no different to Burkina Faso. How Zimbabwe got to be where it is, it was people who were saying that Robert Mugabe must get rid of the British, because Robert Mugabe was also a strong man. He decided to get rid of the British, and Zimbabwe is where it is today because of the decisions that were taken by Robert Mugabe. Now, if we are we are proud of Traore, and we are saying that Traore must continue with what he has started, what happens when he fails? What happens if he's assassinated? What happens to the people of Burkina Faso?
Yeah.
Are we prepared to accommodate them here?
We won't.
Because a revolution is no child's play. You can just go on your phone and, of course, become a revolutionary.
Of course, like Upenzo on social media, Baba, I'm an activist.
But the reality is that decisions that leaders take have consequences. As Zimbabwe today, 40 years ago was thriving. There was no need for Zimbabweans to come to South Africa. In fact, Zimbabwe at some point was called the basket, the bread basket case of South Africa, of Africa.
You're right.
Yes, and the very decisions or the similar policies that Mugabe took, they led to Zimbabwe where Zimbabwe is today. And I'm not saying they were right or they were wrong, but I'm saying what we are praising today is exactly what Mugabe did. And where is Zimbabwe today? Should we, the people who are encouraging Traore, be the ones who are accepting of these Zimbabweans who are products of decisions by their leaders, revolutionary decisions, as some would say, of their leaders? Zimbabwe is not here, or Zimbabweans are not here because of choice. They are here because their leaders made certain decisions. That's why they're here. No Zimbabwean wants to be in South Africa. There is no person from Lesotho who wants to be in South Africa.
Yeah.
It's the decisions that leaders, the leadership takes. And it is this conversation that we are having. It's these people who are saying, stand up, fight. What then happens when you fight and you do not win? So I'm just saying that we need to also be cognizant as a people, because some of these decisions or some of these aspirations that we have, they do have consequences. And many of us as Africans are not prepared, to face these consequences head on, because we do not have this, this pan-Africanist outlook. Of course, when OAU was formed, our founding fathers, they had this vision of a united Africa. But we somehow fraternize with Traore, but we are not pan-Africanist in character. That's all that I'm trying to say.
We're not. Just my closing point on this topic, to emphasize what you're saying, people must be careful what they wish for. It's nice to wish for a good dictator, of which you never know what you're going to get. But the thing about dictatorship is if you veer off from what they stand for, you become part of the enemy. And to put it into context for South Africans, there are many people that don't like the late Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And he was not much different from what you'd call a dictator in the way that he moved, in the way that he put his people first and. But if you look at some of the pains that people had reliving his legacy, it's like that's what a dictatorship is. Mangosuthu could have been that during the struggle, and he could have taken over South Africa, and other people could have said, look, he's put his people first, but it could have been at the inconvenience and the oppression of non-Zulus. And then what does it look like and what does it sound like? So people must be very careful. At least some of these are hopefully going to be answered in one go. Your thoughts on the Afrikaners that decided to take up refugee status in America and Trump and Elon Musk going around spreading disinformation about South Africa?
Yeah, I think for me, the major concern, of course, I've highlighted that I am very proud of what AfriForum has done. I'm not really interested in the legitimacy or the correctness or incorrectness of what they've done. But I'm just proud that AfriForum, they took it upon themselves to start a conversation about farm murderers. For me, I think it shows that Afrikaner leadership, they love their people.
Even if it comes with lies?
No, that's one aspect of it.
Okay.
Remember, what they've done, it's premised, or the basis here is the fact that there have been farm murderers. So from that premise that one Afrikaner farmer has died, it's a cause of concern. 2 is too much, 3 is a lot. So from that premise, I'm saying that I am glad that they were able to stand up for their people. However, the question of lies, it's not new when it comes to the Afrikaner community. I mean, if you go back to history in 1834 or 1835, when they left the Cape Colony because Britain abolished slavery, They called it the Great Trek. When they left the Cape Colony. If you listen to Elon Musk, if you listen to AfriForum talking about the fact that they feed us, the only time that Afrikaners started feeding us is after the 1913 Land Act. Before that, if you look at history again, around 1904, around 1905, there were more Black people who were educated, who owned their businesses. That's how also the ANC was formed, by this very elite. They took it upon themselves when the British abolished slavery. They decided to go to school. When Afrikaners ran away from progress, they decided to go to school. They decided to go to missionary schools and to go overseas to go and study. That's how they came back. They opened their practices.
Afrikaner, the British abolished slavery. Mm-hmm. You're saying, and you're not the first person to say this, I think. Yeah. The reason what would become Afrikaners left was because they weren't happy with those laws, and they moved inland to be able to still exploit a form of slavery away from the Cape.
Yes. So if you look at what they consider to be the Great Trek, it was in 1835, after the British abolished slavery in 1834. So immediately after the British abolished slavery and then decided to include Black people, into entrepreneurship, into schools and so forth, Afrikaners couldn't take it. They decided to leave the Cape Colony. So
it seems like what we call Afrikaners, Dutch descendants and other nations, they always want to move to a space of white supremacy, it seems. Wherever it feels like there's a white supremacist element, that's where they want to find a home. And if they find someone sympathetic to that, you guys are superior to arguably, let's say, Black or others, they're like, okay, this feels like home. Wherever it feels like Black people are being equalized or whatever, they feel like, no, this is not for us. We want to move. Could we argue something like that?
Well, one could say that, but also there are communities which do not want to integrate.
Yes.
The Chinese do not integrate.
Correct.
Most communities do not integrate.
Yeah.
It's primarily...
A lot of the communities in South Africa.
It's mainly Black people who want to integrate with everyone.
I don't know if they want to, but hey, Gumnandi, on the other side, it looks lekker there.
Yes. So
I don't know if we intentionally want to integrate or if it's circumstantial.
It's not only... We want to go to white suburbs. We want to go to white suburbs.
It looks good, is what I'm saying.
We want to go to white schools. Our kids are not allowed to come and study in Afrikaner schools. So we're always going to them. They're not coming to us. Yes.
Yeah, but it looks better there.
Yes. So they're starting their own communities and they're working in their own communities. But what I'm trying to say here is that this myth of greatness by Afrikaners is not a new thing.
The other important thing you're highlighting is that this whole concept of feeding us started after they shifted Black people off their land, where Black people were growing their own food.
Of course.
And now all of a sudden we're feeding you. Well, you're feeding me with my land and my farm, which I was using to feed myself before.
Of course.
Okay.
Remember that Afrikaners took power in 1910 after they defeated the British around 1902 or 1904. So they only took political power in 1910 and established the Republic of South Africa. And then after they established the Republic of South Africa, they then started to enact these laws or these discriminatory laws.
Which they've always wanted, which is why they left the Cape in the first place. They're like, you guys fucked up, we're going to fix it.
And you know why? In 1913, they could not compete with our ancestors. That's why one thing that makes me angry is that when you look at our ancestors, they owned land. They were entrepreneurs, highly educated. They went to the US, they went to Britain, they went to study, went into ships, came back here and started their own businesses. So Afrikaners, because they were uneducated, because they were poor, some of them were in concentration camps, British concentration camps.
That's correct.
Our ancestors were leading. They were the first, and now our generation is the last. So when I look at people who look at Traore, I always say our ancestors, they managed to self-actualize without any government in place. So for me, these are distinctions, because without all these laws that Afrikaners enacted, they would not be able to compete with Black people.
Okay.
Yes. So
you needed laws, Baba, to have an unfair advantage.
Yes. So now they're complaining.
Because like on like, You feel oppressed.
Oh, yes.
No Khalelo Trump.
Yes. Look at Solplaki. Look at George Munsiwa. Look at Pixley Sakaseme. Look at Mangena.
Oh, izinkunzi zangempela.
Yes. You look at all these people. These were men who were proud. These were men who were educated. These were men who were building their communities. These were men who, in short, many of them were even representing their communities. I mean, if you look at the formation of the ANC was formed by lawyers who were all representing their tribes. So, for me, Afrikaners, I actually feel sorry for them. Because they cannot go anywhere. They're stuck here in South Africa. And now, because one also has to take into consideration the English and Afrikaner distinction, they always have to run somewhere. So for me, I actually feel sorry for them. But as I said, I applaud them because...
Standing up.
Yeah, I applaud them because Afrikaner lives matter, but they do undermine us.
Shame.
But then if those guys, and what you're saying about the guys who formed the ANC, they came from... they were part of the kingships in those villages that they come from, most of them, the people you mentioned, royal families. Then why then is there a fight to assimilate to whiteness and be part of the white community and not necessarily that we want to stand on our own? That's the thing that always puzzles me when it comes to the formation of the ANC.
But these guys were educated, as Phapano said. Some of them, Abo Pixley, studied overseas. That's what they know, like a Tabombegi.
I hear you.
So that's what they'd want here, and because they'd experienced some form of integration, then
instead of standing on our own, we can do it.
What does standing on our own mean? Wearing a peshu and having income, which is what they didn't know.
Are we doing that now as a generation?
But the founders of the ANC were not doing that. They were educated, spoke good English.
Yes.
You wanted them to want something that they're not living.
Oh, okay. So that assimilation makes sense because they come from...
It's what they know.
The studied environment says, I want to become like them.
No, they were that.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were black English noblemen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it was the very British that enabled them to self-actualize. So
they liked the British.
Not that they liked the British. At the time, remember, they are products. Our forefathers are products of their own time. But also look at a typical South African man, a typical African man, a typical South African woman. We want to look like white people. We are doing BBL. It's not like we are attempting.
Okay, maybe not BBL. Let's say bleaching.
Oh, yes.
White people definitely.
Yes.
That's not assimilation.
Oh, yes. You've got black women who are bleaching.
Relaxer and those things.
So our forefathers, as much as they saw themselves through, the British aristocracy and so forth, they went back to their communities. They opened schools. Look at Dube, the first president of the ANC. Yes, he had a school in KZN. You look at one person that people don't speak about, George Dick Munsiwa, and the Barolong in Mafikeng, what they did for their communities. So here you are talking about people who did not only go and study, they went to study, came back
and they showed
changed.
Results.
Yes, and they changed their communities.
It's maybe one of the failures of the apartheid government and the Afrikaners, that they couldn't show black products, black Afrikaners, who are proud farmers, who are proud to speak Afrikaans, so that those black people could then protect what Afrikanerness means. The same way we'd protect the English language in 76 and those kind of things. The British were very good at what they did.
Yeah.
They'd make you feel like, excellent, are you winning here? So that when Afrikaners or the Russians or the Chinese come, you get hostile. Hey, leave the white Brits alone. These are good folks.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I think you've covered my question. I'm not going to go deeper. There's a point I forgot to mention earlier when you spoke about the European Union. And I wanted to say one of the reasons we can't have an African Union like that and have one Schengen visa or an African visa is our economies are so vastly different. Mm-hmm. And part of the problem is when you've been given, at least from a South African perspective, we feel like we got the best of the colonial hit. It becomes difficult to want to share those crumbs with other people. And if there was a way for the rest of Africa to not feel like they're coming to just feast on here, I think it would be easier to come up with that concept, along with what you were saying, which is very fair, that a lot of the leaders, they know that if it was easier to travel and trade, they would lose power. So they make it difficult for us to trade and travel But one of the things the European Union has is it's not that France is so wealthy and the rest of Western Europe is poor. So everyone is flocking to France. People almost don't mind still going back home. Whereas here, it's slightly different. And we need to find, at least in the Pan-Africanist vision concept, we need to find a way to be like, let's have one passport, maybe one currency, but it mustn't be that everyone wants to come to Joburg. You can travel the whole country, but everyone wants to come here. Let's make it cool as well to go settle in other places.
Yeah, but you see, interestingly, most European countries, they were forced to work with each other. Remember,
who forced them, do you know?
Remember Germany and France, they did not see eye to eye after the World War II.
Sure. The Germans.
Yes. So America had to come with the Marshall Plan. The same with China and Japan. So let me just start with France and Germany. They were forced to work together after World War II.
Who forced them to work together?
It's the US.
Oh, Big Daddy America.
It's the US. It's no different to Japan and China. It was the US which helped China to defeat Japan. Now, what is happening? I mean, Japan works with the US.
That is true.
Japan, which was bombed in 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan today is in the G7. They are the biggest allies of the US.
You're correct.
Yes, so many of these countries were forced to work with each other. So their economic integration, it was not organic. No different to Britain, no different to some of those West European countries. So I think for us, we need to really look at some of these examples.
So America must come and also help Africa to get along.
We really need to learn how to get along.
Ask Big Daddy Trump to come and help us get along.
Not Trump. The question is, can we self-regulate, as Africans? Because we also, you were speaking about Bantustans. There are people who see themselves as Zulus. I see myself as a Morolong, and you've got another person, and, you find people do not like Zulus. So we are still, I always say that we are dealing with problems that Europeans were dealing with 100 years ago. We are still dealing with witchcraft. We are still, the very Sahel region. If you go to Burkina Faso, the second biggest economy in your Burkina Faso, your Niger, your Mali, it's witchcraft.
Oh, donkey. You almost mentioned.
Yes.
Sorry.
Your marabout, they call it marabout. It's very.
I take that back.
It's very popular. So we are dealing with.
Is it witchcraft or imiti? Now you're also lying. It's just the multi-market.
No. They
call it witchcraft.
No, marabout, they call it witchcraft. So, but what I'm trying to say is...
I'm sure that's dominated by women. I withdraw immediately.
But what I'm
I withdraw.
But what I'm trying to say, Penuel, is that we are dealing with issues that these developed countries were dealing with 80 years ago,
Tribalism.
100 years ago, and so forth. So we need to quickly catch up.
You don't support tribalism. Sorry, going to that point of should we bring back Bantustans? Not in the way they were formulated, but the idea, I think it's called federalism. Would let the Zulu people develop KZN and focus on developing it so that Penuel doesn't have to come to Joburg because there's an economy in KZN. Let the people of the Eastern Cape develop the Eastern Cape so that they're not rushing to Cape Town or Durban. Let the people of the Free State focus on developing the Free State. So you don't believe in that type of...
No, I do
thing.
not.
You're happy with the integration because there's an argument that, I don't want to get cancelled. There's an argument that some of the business elite during apartheid and even before, it was in their best interests for the Bantustans to get dismantled and for South Africa to become united because they were trying to push business interests in mini states. Okay, I can mention an example because a guest has raised this. They raised Saul Kirsner as an example. Sun City, Tsogosan today, but he was trying to do business, I think, in the Transkei, and he ended up having to bribe, or there were allegations of bribing to do business there. So for people like that, having to speak to, let's say, a Mangosuthu Telies in KZN, and someone else, and a Mangope, it's like, no, man, just dismantle this whole thing, and if you guys get organized, then I can run business across this entire... I don't like this having to speak to different role players, because in the Cape, there's these players in the Transkei, Siskai, KwaZulu, Bophuthatswana, Venda. I don't want that. So dismantle this thing. Would it not help to fast track the development, and especially now where many of us are condensed in the metropoles, how do we develop the rest of the country if people keep migrating to Joburg, Cape Town, Durban?
Yeah, I think let's start with Solkezna. I think what you need to let me not say understand, but remember during apartheid, gambling was illegal. During apartheid, pornography was illegal.
Those were good times.
Yes. So
yes. So
those were good times. Yes. So the people who studied your scope and so forth even had to take.
What scope? I don't know what you're talking about. What scope?
Yeah, the soft porn.
What scope?
Well, young people.
No.
Young people.
No scope.
Yeah.
Yes. What scope?
Penthouse, yes, and others. It was.
Before Hustler came through.
Yes.
No scope.
Yeah, it was a soft porn magazine.
Hey, that's so disgusting.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about.
That thing ruined people, man, in primary schools and all.
Yes.
Primary? Jeez, you guys are disgusting in high school.
Yes. So then what happened?
Sorry, Scope was a pornographic magazine.
Yes.
I accidentally bumped into one when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I didn't open it at all.
Yeah. You remember the stars?
I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything.
Yeah. So
those were good times.
Yeah. So the publishers of these magazines, they had to take the apartheid government to court before they could even publish. Before, the courts were the ones who decided to legalize pornography. But
so the courts same thing happening now. The courts became stronger than government.
Well,
government says no porn. I'm a court. Judge. Nabameli were like, no, it's fine.
So how do you give such a judgment? So the judge had to open the magazine. Like
no, man, let the people have a good time.
Yeah. But
they look stressed.
Yeah, but one of the things that I'm sure the apartheid government said, they cannot see white tits. Because with all these magazines, they would always hide, the tits of all these white women. So many of these things were not allowed in apartheid South Africa.
Yeah.
But Solkezna could go to this Bantustans and negotiate with your Mangope. But when you assess what Mangope did with the money, when you assess what in Transkei, yes, what they did with all these monies, they were able to develop their Bantustans. Mangope was able to build universities, to build, stadiums, yes.
He did a lot.
Yeah, so he did a lot.
Infrastructure.
So the difference now, and I think we are clutching on straws, is that we do not have capable leaders. So you look at the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape government has an annual budget. But then you look at the level of progress, of development, and so forth. So now you can say, let's go back to the Bantustans. But the reality is that the people of the Eastern Cape who are not benefiting from their own government continue to vote for the same leaders.
Don't you think if people from the Eastern Cape, because some of the most celebrated entrepreneurs in South Africa, and I guess politicians are from there, if they were forced to be contained there, don't you think they would develop the place? Sisa Ngebulana almost becomes one of the only guys developing that area. But the rest of the Xhosa businessmen, Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town, but all of that talent in the Eastern Cape could have turned the Eastern Cape into something special.
Unfortunately, migration is as old as humankind.
We wouldn't be able to contain them.
People will always move.
I guess Mandela were also here in Joburg, even with the same...
Yes, people will always move. But, for me, it's a question of...
So you've got a hair in your lash. I don't know if you can see it. It might be bugging you. It's a long one. I'm sure it's gone. Please turn to the side. Other side.
Okay,
please. It's still there, but as long as it doesn't bug you.
Okay, no.
As long as it doesn't bug you.
I'm okay. When you speak of our poor people who get angry with the conversations that we are having, the fact that we are not sympathetic, it is our people who are recipients of the social grants of these RDP houses who vote for these leaders in the Eastern Cape.
Eastern Cape and Limpopo.
Yes, and in Limpopo. So when you speak of these hospitals, I mean, it's not necessarily the structure. It's the very fact that we continue to vote for the same people who continue to perpetuate, poverty and so on. So if you look at the Western Cape, for example, people, normally make this example that, there are informal settlements and so forth. But the reality is that the people who primarily go to the Western Cape and create these informal settlements are people from the Eastern Cape. So what I normally say is that in the Western Cape, you've got an Eastern Cape problem. But again, you cannot stop.
In the Western Cape, you've got an Eastern Cape problem.
Yes, you've got an Eastern Cape problem.
/ mini Zimbabwe. Well, Eastern Cape is Zimbabwe. Sorry, I'm sorry.
But then,
I'm sorry to my people in the Eastern Cape, but we'll speak about it another day.
Are you sorry, but because it's the truth? Why are you sorry?
Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah, but then again, you cannot stop human movement because the people in the Eastern Cape who vote for the ANC, they're going to the Eastern Cape, to the Western Cape looking for economic opportunities. Now, the question is, when they come to the Western Cape, because the Western Cape, the interest is white interest, what does the government do? But at the same time, does the budget, is it enough? And I think those are some of the questions that you are asking. But humans, they will always move.
You're saying even with federalism, we wouldn't be able to contain that. And you don't think there'd be an intentional effort to try and develop your Bantustan, you don't think people would think if it's Lesotho or if it's Eswatini, we wanted to, I guess, maybe those are great examples. Lesotho and Eswatini are not developing.
I guess unless there's a law that says you can't move.
Because Lesotho and Eswatini maybe then help your argument. You're like, if you want Bantustans, Lesotho is a Sotho Bantustan, Eswatini is a Swati Bantustan. Are they thriving?
They're not.
And if the answer is no, there's your answer right there.
Yes. So you cannot stop human movement. That's what I was saying to you. As much as we are going to complain about Zimbabweans, people will always move where there are better pastures, where there are better economic opportunities.
Better white pastures.
Yes. But the reality is that we as Black people, we are the ones who vote for our own exploitation.
They, not all
and
of
our
us.
own. Well, I speak for
Eastern Cape and Limpopo. Skhathele cutting edge.
Yes. But there are many areas where the ANC has done well. I mean, there are areas where the ANC has done well.
Not KwaZulu. KwaZulu. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't support the ANC or MK.
But remember, MK itself is a product of the ANC.
That is a fact. It's a breakaway.
So, for example, you can't say, I hear people saying, and many MK members, the ANC, it has been total failure. I said, but
the last 30 years.
But President Zuma led the ANC.
Look at what the ANC has done in the last 30 years.
Yes.
Like, ANC was mine.
Yes.
21.
President Zuma led the ANC for over 60 years. So now it's like you are throwing the baby.
As a senior leader. 60.
For over 60 years.
Because I know he was president for 2 terms. He was deputy president for 2 terms.
Yeah, he went
Before
to exile.
that, at some point, I think he was premier. Was he ever premier of KZN?
No, he was not.
No,
he was an MEC.
He was an MEC.
He was the chairperson.
Yeah.
He was the chairperson.
Sorry, you said he went into exile.
Yes. At a very... Yes. So, and how would you stop Zulus from marrying Tswanas? Or Tswanas from marrying? You see, that's why, Europeans have got one passport. They don't have to worry about these things. That's why I'm saying that we are dealing with issues. Yes. Yeah. You are literally dealing with issues that Europeans were dealing with. At some point, even now, the Irish, the Scottish, the Brits.
Ireland, Scotland, Wales. Hey, so boring. And remove borders. They're boring for everybody.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom.
So I'm just saying it's a question of leadership. You can lead in Limpopo.
Hey, no, maybe not. But as an example, hypothetically, you?
Are you saying you cannot lead?
The next question here. Limpopo now, they're the second biggest economic driver. What's that region?
Which one?
You said there's a region in West Africa where the second biggest economic driver is...
the Sahel.
Isn't it not the second biggest economic driver? There's lightning. Anyways,
it didn't work.
Sorry, I'm gonna bunch these 3 together.
Mm-hmm.
What is your projection after Cyril Ramaphosa exits? Who's gonna take over? There's rumors now of potentially Patrice Motsepe getting into politics, which I think is nonsense. Just as a concept, I don't believe it. So I'll have to see it to believe it. I'll explain if you ask. What do you think will happen to Umkhonto weSizwe after Ubaba Zuma? And I guess this will then lead us into any potential projections for, because we're in a so-called GNU now, Grand Coalition. What do you think we might be seeing in 2029, especially with these other 2 factors?
Let's start with Patrice. Why do you think it's nonsense?
I don't know South African politics that well, so I have to first add that as a disclaimer. But from the little bit that I've seen, South Africa is very big on earning your keep, especially in an institution like the ANC. I don't remember people being parachuted into leadership in the ANC. Some people could be like, yeah, but Ramaphosa came back as a deputy. He'd earned his stripes a long time before that. For Patrice to not have served at any of the structures and to come purely from business. Yes, he might have been trained at CAF, of which I think his presidency was bought, but that's just my opinion. But for him to be parachuted into the ANC and to then contest to be president, even with all the money, I would say that maybe that would be the KO that Ramaphosa were brought for. Would he come destroy this thing? Because as we had a guest, Jan, from Citizens, who was speaking about the different interest groups and starting off with the business elite. If their issue is in future, we're going to need to be able to control government, and the best way is through coalitions. That means we need to weaken the ANC. Maybe they can bring Patrice in and he'll become a compromise president under a coalition government with a stronger DA and other parties. But for Patrice to just come into the ANC, Gukona guys that have been serving for that long, and for them to just accept, even if they're being bribed, I think every ANC stalwart would have to see that as the highest level of disrespect.
Okay. I hear you, but
no, but you're free to not even listen to anything I've said and explain why you think he's a worthy candidate.
No. For me, it's not even a question of him being worthy.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that I know is that Patrice was a leader of the ANC, and there've been videos doing the rounds where he was going to campaigns and so forth.
A leader in what capacity, comrade?
Well, he was a leader, a member of the ANC.
Or a member.
Card
carrying.
Yes, a member of the ANC. And you must also recognize that there were, several people who went into business who were sympathetic to the ANC. And Patrice is one of them. For me, it's not entirely about, what will happen to the dignity of the ANC. Because if you look at the ANC does not have any moral standing as we speak.
Jeez,
so
that's tough.
To say, it will not, it will be a betrayal of some sort. For me, I look at the country more than the ANC. And the question that I ask is, to save our country, because our country has a litany of challenges. So the question that I ask is, what type of leader does South Africa need in order for us to change course? And if we look at the ANC, and if the ANC is obviously going to contest, would that leader be able to save the ANC? And would that leader be able to ensure that the ANC becomes a leader of society again?
Sorry, the last point I wanted to add, in the last elections of 2024, Motsepe, through his companies and I think his trusts, funded the ANC, the EFF, I'm not sure about the DA and the Freedom Front Plus. So again, as an ANC heavyweight, to have someone like that who's just funded some of our oppositions in the last elections, yes, sorry. Okay. But I hear the questions you're raising.
So all I'm trying to say is the question that I think many ANC members and leaders are asking themselves, how do we save the ANC? And perhaps Patrice might not be the right candidate.
For you?
For me, I
Would you consider him?
Of course.
Okay.
From an economic perspective, we are speaking about thousands of young people who are looking for jobs. And the reality is that politicians, and I come from politics, we do not know how to create jobs.
Do you think Patrice knows how to create jobs?
Well, he is a product of whiteness, of course.
Do you think Cyril Ramaphosa, he came in as a billionaire president, do you think he knows how to create jobs?
A few jobs.
At Shandora.
Remember, there's a vast difference between someone who has created some job and a politician who has never created a particular job. But of course, the ANC has created a developmental state and so forth. But Patrice is not he's not the ideal candidate. What I would really love to see from the ANC, and I think it might happen, I think you would have the likes of Thabo Mbeki, who's quite old, attempting to intervene because
as a leader.
No. To intervene in terms of who takes over, because now you are stuck with Fikile Mbalula.
You're stuck. You decided to use the word stuck.
Well,
we are being gifted.
And unfortunately,
with the Fikile Mbalula. We are being blessed. But these are the words.
But you can imagine.
Not stuck.
But you can imagine if Fikile Mbalula is the best that the ANC can offer, then we are in trouble.
Is he?
Because if the ANC wins and it's able to go into a coalition, you will then have him as a president.
But is he the best that the ANC has to offer right now?
No, of course.
I mean, he's the guy that negotiated, I'd like to think, the GNU with Helen Zille. He was the guy.
No, he was forced to negotiate because people had outvoted the ANC. The ANC
sure, but it's like Kodesa. I know Ramaphosa, but they were forced to negotiate. So
Mbalula
comes like a Ramaphosa, Helen Zille becomes the next Rolf Mayor for a government of national unity.
Unfortunately, the thing about Mbalula, he does not take himself seriously. So he cannot expect society to take him seriously.
But at least we'll have good laughs. The country will get to relax. He used to be a minister of... Uraz Matez was the minister of fun. So a bunch of losers. Huh? I'm actually serious because this is an ANC Youth League president. This is a guy who served as in a bunch of ministerial posts. He's currently the SG of the ANC. So I'm not sure.
They would never allow that as the ANC.
Come on.
They would never.
Oh,
Mbalula. You think Fikile Mbalula...
Did I not just give you his portfolio?
How are they going to stop him?
Did I not just give you his portfolio?
Well,
you would have said exactly what you're saying now if I told you he's running for ANC Youth League president. He might be a minister of the police. What else? He was minister of roads or whatever.
But here's how the ANC just
and now he's the SG. I don't understand what you're saying. And he was sent to negotiate a GNU.
But here's what I'm saying.
And you're like, they would never allow. The guy's been given so much leadership.
The ANC now is at a point where they're like, okay, out of everyone in the whole leadership or anyone in the ANC, who can get us votes? Whether it's in the ANC or outside of the ANC.
I don't think Cyril was the guy that they put forward to get them votes.
Outside of, who was there? Zuma.
No, it doesn't matter. But I don't think he was the guy to get them votes is my argument.
Who would have been?
No. Forget who would have been.
Yeah.
Forget who would have been. That's what I'm saying with Mbalula.
And can I just quickly...
It's not so much about... That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, Penuel,
is he the best? Because it may not be.
Penuel,
to get votes is not.
Yes. And can I just quickly say something? If you're following Patrice, you need to look at the December prayer session where he was able to fill FNB Stadium.
But that's money. He does that
every
year.
Who does not use money in politics?
No, I understand that.
No, but I'm saying that.
But that is because of the ZCC. That is not necessarily a
ZCC.
Ramaphosa.
ZCC.
Let's allow it to maybe sell a point.
I'm not bringing in a Ramaphosa factor.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the very fact that Patrice Motsepe can mobilize, the ANC at this stage cannot mobilize this number of people who can fill up FNB Stadium. You can say it's ZCC. Those ZCC churchgoers or church members are voters. Those people from the IPCC church are voters. So churches are highly organized. So you must look at many African leaders and you must look at the culture. You must look at what they do. They start soccer teams or soccer clubs. So what he's doing, it is not rocket science. Yeah. So it's not rocket science. He's got some of the most organized organs of society behind him.
Sundowns.
Behind him.
And then mobilizing the churches.
The ANC, as we speak, cannot fill the stadium in Khayelitsha. That's the ANC today. So Patrice Motsepe might be more popular than the ANC, unless...
But now we have to assume that they're coming to the stadium for Patrice, which I don't know if that's true.
It does not matter. If Patrice has these people in his pocket, that's another story altogether. In fact, to the extent that he can even contest as an independent candidate.
But why couldn't he mobilize these people for the ANC if he's that influential?
If that's true, why couldn't he mobilize the ZCC people for Time Bank? That's another thing as well where I'm a bit...
Yes,
I hear you, but I'm like...
I think it's perception, and maybe you believe in the perception, and we don't.
Remember, for now, this is just an analysis.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, look, it's important... when you do your analysis to say what are the eventualities? Because if your Lekhanyani tells members of the ZCC Church to vote for a Patrice Motsepe, what then happens? So you look at how, he has been mobilizing. I do not know if he's going to contest, but I do know that the ANC has got senior leaders. I know that the ANC have got people who can actually save the ANC. I do not believe that the ANC should actually go to elections and contest. I do not believe that the ANC should actually go to its national conference in 2027. I think it will weaken the party even further. It is likely to also form or to lead to a splinter party. But as I'm saying, there are good comrades. You've got your Sputla, the minister of Ramokgopa. Khwezi Enso.
Yeah.
Yes. So you've got Khwezi Enso.
The Black King, Khwezi
Black?
Enso.
Oh, that's what it means.
Yeah,
Yes.
Khwezi Enso.
Enso means
Yeah.
black.
Oh, the Black King.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
that's actually a beautiful name.
Yes.
Okay.
So you also have Ndlovu from KZN. And also the good thing which comes from, the NEC is that what they've been able to do now, they've been able to deploy senior leaders as well. So the question for me...
What's Mdu's surname? Sorry. I know he normally gets interviewed.
I forgot his...
Sorry. No, please continue.
Yes. So the question is the ANC prepared to save itself? Or is the ANC prepared to win a narrow margin, then go into a coalition?
Is it Ntuli?
I think it's Ndlovu.
He's got a position currently. I think I've seen him on
He's a chief
billboards.
whip. No, man, is it Ndlovu? Yeah.
But right now, what I'm asking myself is,
Ntumseni.
we are always having this chat about big business will decide who gets into power. Do you think whatever business people are saying and what the ANC want, are they meeting each other halfway? Because now there's a GNU. Do you think they'll have the same leader that they want to be in power in the next national elections?
Remember, what big business always thinks about is a conducive environment.
Yes.
Are the politicians who are leading, are they thinking of the investment opportunities? Because there is no investor in the world who will go into a country where, for example, the leadership is talking about expropriation. The leadership is talking about nationalization. Of course, as activists, we can push for nationalization, but it's not my money. An investor comes here with their millions and they put
Billions.
money, or billions, yes, of course. They want to know that their money is going to be protected. So as ordinary people and, as revolutionaries, we don't think about these things. Yet we want someone to create jobs. Who's going to create those jobs? So at the moment, big business wants a sensible person. Of course, we are going to look for people who are, as I said, who are revolutionaries. But are we going to get the necessary investment? And remember, the other thing is, business can be coerced. Business can be engaged. The only difference is that if you do not engage business and you allow it to do as it pleases, you'd have circumstances like in South Africa. But the reality is that you want a person who is stable. You do not want a person who will be, talking about nationalization of the mines and so forth. Because as we speak, as a majority, we cannot even buy these mines that are already there. We are waiting for some investor to come and buy our mines, to come and do the studies. Is it geo?
Yeah.
Yes. So, you need to really look. Because, the thing that I have learned, especially since leaving politics, is that you really become realistic because you now start taking helicopter view. Because now when you're in politics, you are driven by ideology. You're not really driven by pragmatism. So this, are some of the things that
pragmatism, when you're in politics and activism, looks like selling out.
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. But the reality is that also when you look at a leader who talks revolutionary languages, they are also, at night, they've got businesses, they've got companies, they're children, their family members.
We're told that they wear Gucci, apparently.
Oh, yes, they wear Gucci's, and they will tell you, white monopoly capital. I know that I was part of the people who were leading this narrative. But then you realize these leaders, they stay in the same environment, in the same suburbs with white people. Their children go to the same schools.
Correct.
They go to the same university. They dine together. And they speak the same language. But what they tell ordinary people is something completely different. They divide us. So they work together. Their children work together but they divide us. You find them in Hyde Park. I mean, how many opposition leaders?
Why are we talking about one person here?
Yeah.
But okay.
No. It's not only.
It's all of them.
No, it's all of them.
They all live in Hyde
No,
Park.
they all live in Hyde Park.
They all live in Hyde Park.
Yes. They live.
They all live in Hyde Park.
Oh,
There's only two guys that live in Hyde Park that are popular.
Hey,
Okay, Muna, no, let's carry on.
yes. So all these leaders, they stay next to President Ramaphosa's house. Yet they will, so I'm just saying that we need to be careful as ordinary people because, of course, we have to go to public hospitals and fight for that medicine. They go to private healthcare.
One of these so-called leaders would speak about an organized revolution. And to many people, it almost sounds like, look, say the things they want to hear, but just keep them in check. But don't shake too much. Because now and he said this in an interview even, that when the people get really frustrated, who are they going to go for? They're going to go for white people and for people like us who are living better.
So they need me to neutralize them. They need me to speak to them. I remember that interview.
Yeah.
I still want to ask, sorry, that's Julius Malema, by the way, so people don't think we're busy sidestepping things.
How far are we?
Oh, you want to go?
No, let's finish.
Okay. Now I want to go back to the questions. Names. The one interesting thing you've said is you don't think the ANC should go to national conference. What would be the alternative to national conference? And in your opinion, I know it's still very early days. In your opinion, maybe who are the top 3 candidates that you would suggest? Not who are the best or who are next in line, that you suggest would be the best if you were to advise them, the ANC, to take over after Ramaphosa. We've got Paul Mashatile, the deputy. We've mentioned Ufile Mbalula as the SG. I'm not sure. You've mentioned Khosienzo as well, the Minister of Electricity. Gwede Mantashe claims that he's stepping down from politics. Umamunaledi Pando, that many people like that as well, has stepped down from politics. So who would be your top 3? And then what do you think is going to happen with Umkhonto weSizwe after Ubaba Zuma?
Well, let me not mention name because there are people that I'm close to, so I wouldn't want to mention. And they're extremely good. They're highly competent. They're
Would you compromise yourself if you gave names?
I will compromise them.
Okay. Please answer this then. What would be an alternative to the national conference?
Well, a Politburo led by elders.
So a gathering of elders saying, listen, we're not going to go to conference, we're not going to vote, but we'd like you guys to buy into this idea. Let's have a conversation on where we want to go and let's agree on a leader collectively without necessarily voting.
Of course, yes. Because my major concern is that, especially with this younger generation, and when I say younger, I include those who are in their 50s and early 60s.
In the ANC?
In the ANC.
Because really in the ANC, when you're 50, you're very young.
Yes.
Still fresh, but
the love of money, the love of women. The love of money, the love of women before the country. That is my major concern.
The money and the women are my country.
Yes. You have people who are...
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep quiet.
So you've got people in their 70s and in their 80s who fought for the ANC. They are disheartened at the state of the ANC. They are disheartened at the direction that the ANC is taking. They love the ANC, many of them more than they love themselves. And they still remember why they went to exile and why bazabalaz. So you've got a different type of people in the ANC. You've got a person who wants to pillage. You've got them in municipalities. They're just stealing. You've got them in provincial government. You have them, as ministers, but you've got genuine ANC leaders who are retired, who love this movement and who love this country. And remember, one of the things that is also critical, the ANC has always been an elitist organization that wants to eradicate poverty, that wants to alleviate poverty. And we are not seeing that at the moment. So you've got these leaders who still appreciate the values and ideals of the ANC. And those are the people that I think, for me, can save the ANC and can also save the country. In terms of MK, that is a crisis.
Sorry, before you go to MK, your suggestion, this is not something that you've heard in the grapevine. Your suggestion is, ANC, listen to me, Phapano. Please don't go to national conference. Please gather your elders that still have the morals and the values of the ANC. Let them come together and suggest a leader that is good for the ANC's future, married with what's good for the future of South Africa. That's your suggestion. Okay, and you're not going to mention names?
I cannot mention names.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Umkhonto weSizwe.
MK. Wow. MK is a crisis because MK is Jacob Zuma. And President Zuma is, 82 years old? I think he's living his best life. It's his third term, actually.
Hey, Nkunzi Malanga yangempela.
Yes.
Oh, come on, Msholozi, the good Msholozi.
Yes. So what you are seeing now, there are people who do not want to be led by his children. There are people who do not want to be led by children of his friends or his allies. And this,
Wait, children of his friends?
your Ntlamulo, who is the son of Joan Lela, and the nephew to Moyani.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, if
Ntlamulo?
Yes.
He's related to Tom Moyani?
He's the nephew of Tom Moyani.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. So there are people who genuinely want to be led by credible, politicians. And that's why you are seeing that it's difficult for some people to even accept Floyd Shivambu. Because these are people, this is a clique. It doesn't necessarily mean that Floyd is the best because, of course, Floyd was parachuted from the EFF
into the MK.
Into MK when people worked really hard to ensure that MK gets the numbers that it has gotten. And of course, to be honest, on someone like Duduzile, she actually worked hard to ensure that.
Hence, she'd call him Umafikizolo and his supporters.
Yes.
Which is sad to see that, but it's to understand the significance of. You weren't here when we built MK into what it is, and and come and shift your weight around.
Also, it's the same with her. She has no political credentials whatsoever. The only credential that she has is that she's the daughter of President Zuma. It's the same as MK members who are making noise about Gwede Mantashe's son, yet they have no problem with being led by family members. So, but anyway, coming back to MK, MK is really going to struggle. Because what you have, I call it the unity of the wounded. The people who are there are wounded people.
Like COPE.
Oh, yes, like COPE. You've got your...
It got formed out of frustration and anger. And I think I asked Ubabu, the chairperson of MK, ngiyaxolisa baba for forgetting your name.
Oh, Ubaba, oh, yes, one of my favorite people.
Chair of... Because I interviewed him earlier this year. And one of the questions I asked him was, are you guys not just disgruntled?
The former
because
minister.
You were Ubabu Nkosinathi Nhleko.
Oh, I know him quite well.
Are you not disgruntled because at a time when Ramaphosa was in charge, people were removed from presidency, people were moved out of ministerial positions? And he said no, but I mean, I obviously take everything politicians say with a pinch of salt. So you're very right in a gathering of the wounded.
Yeah. But people like Nhleko, well-vested, knowledgeable. I mean, but at the same time, you would also understand that politics is about now. In politics, you have to steal, you have to grab now. Because if you don't, someone will surely, in 5 years' time, remove you and someone will come.
You have to steal.
Yes, of course. Yes, someone else. Why do you think all politicians, after their term ends, they're wealthy, they're rich? So it's not because of hard work. Many of them, it's through proximity and patronage.
Yeah.
So, with MK, for me, the ANC needs some sort of, shaking up. But when I look at MK and, having been part of MK, it has become another opposition party. There's nothing exciting about the MK, especially from a policy perspective, from the issues that they articulate, but more than anything, they're highly divided. So it will be interesting to watch, but I think MK is going to die a slow death, no different to COPE. But more than anything, when I was assisting Tlamulo with the statements, we were writing the statements, and when he was going to different media houses and he would articulate issues.
You were part of MK?
No, I was assisting them. I was not part of. I was not part of MK.
Does this mean you're willing to assist other political organizations?
Of course, yes.
Okay, no problem.
Of course, yes. So when I was assisting him, one of the things that always came out was that we must never ever attack the ANC, but we must always say the ANC of Ramaphosa. And we were told that the role of MK or the formation of MK, it's not to destroy the ANC.
I know Zuma tried to articulate that a lot,
yes.
Which again sounds like COPE when you speak about the ANC of Uzuma versus Utabo Mbeki.
Yes, so you see, MK is doing exactly what COPE did. They're doing exactly what the breakaway. Of course, the EFF is the only one. I mean, Julius was expelled, but before JZ was expelled, there were negotiations to form MK. So for me, I mean, this idea that we must save the ANC. I mean, it resonated with me. That's why I was able to assist MK Party. But I think, MK Party does not even have a constitution. You know, MK Party is not a democratic party.
That is correct.
Yes.
That's been proven.
Yes, anyone can lead MK. And if you look at parliament, people are not even looking at this. The researchers who are in parliament, they are children of MK leaders. They are girlfriends of MK leaders. So, and then you would want to look at the ANC and you want the ANC and you speak and say that, no, the ANC, it's not the ANC of Mandela, it's not the ANC of Tambo. When MK has turned out to be more than, it has turned out to be a farce, So for me, I would hope that MK would have lived to some expectations. Ideologically, it's also all over the place. You do not know if it's a Marxist party, whether it's okay. Sometimes they say, "Oh, we are pro traditional leaders," so it's all over the place. So for me, MK will die with President Zuma because there is no strong leader at the moment who will take over from President Zuma. And the issue of succession, I can tell you, I was removed from a WhatsApp group when I said, "Are we going to discuss succession?" I'm not saying President Zuma is going to pass on tomorrow, but the reality is that the old man has done his work. He's now 81. Are we now going to start identifying young people who will take over, young people with integrity, high morale, high discipline, and so forth? Yeah. And I was kicked out on the WhatsApp group by Dr. Tantim Tanti, who was then the TG of MK Party. Hopefully he's a great man. You will invite him here. But he will tell you the issues that I articulated when I was there. The issues of what I call a two-stage theory. Because you are saying that you are not fighting the ANC, does it mean that the MK Party at some point will cease to exist?
And be absorbed into the ANC once Ramaphosa leaves.
To the ANC. Because
once Zuma leaves the ANC, the Thabo Mbeki guys will come back into the ANC.
So those are some of the questions that I asked. I said, when you are developing this constitution, which will not be endorsed by any conference, but by us, are we going to speak of a two-stage theory? Because we have been told that we are not fighting the ANC. Because you must remember, the ANC was formed by our forefathers. So what President Zuma told us has turned out to be something that is completely different. Now they're clinging on to power. Obviously, they're going to contest the weak ANC, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Let's close it. I've got one more question for you. We're not going to get to speak about unemployment. I think it's a huge topic just on its own. Robotics, AI, and the like. For today, I don't think it's going to be as important. What was the question I wanted to ask? Oh, this one is important, and we can close with it. How do we solve the issue of poor / non-existent succession planning in the African community? Families, businesses, political parties, even monarchs. What is the problem there and how do we solve it? Is it always going to be a case of Umkhulu's passed on, my father's gone, my father left this business and everything collapses? Can we not learn? Should we not be having a conversation? And maybe for younger people to start having the conversations with your father, your grandfather, your mom who owns a big business or a business, your political leaders, to say, listen, can we speak about this thing? We're not planning anything for you because that we're planning to kill you. Can we speak about this thing? Because it's one of the weaknesses that we had. And I've referenced before that when Queen Elizabeth passed on, all of us knew how the line goes. It's like in a list, Mauye Parliament, everyone knows the list where you sit. Why can't we have something similar? They had to do a rush job when it came to the Zulu kingdom when Uzwelithini passed on. Every time we speak about the ANC, there's like a rush job and no one knows what's going on. And you're like, it can't carry on being like this. What would your suggestion be in resolving that succession planning issue from family, community, business, and political and traditional leadership level?
No. I think I've spoken about this before. We need to be organized. And let me just speak of one of the things that we have initiated. We have initiated what we call the African agenda, where we're trying to look at different issues of why, as a people, we are still behind. Why our townships, they've become, gangster. zones, why as a people we're not working together, why we do not own anything, and why we continue to be consumers. I think you can start, having answers to some of these questions when you start dissecting what has gone wrong and why are we not able, to have simple answers to some of these questions. Our communities are, you would know the townships are disintegrated, the villages. So it's difficult to come up with a definite answer when you do not have a point where you can start at. So I think we really need to go back to basics, and we really need to look at our communities. And of course, we also need to recognize that at this moment, the majority of households, they are led by women. The men are not there. So we must...
Are you raising that as a good thing, as a bad thing, or as just a fact?
No, it's a fact. Okay. And it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It would be a bad thing if Black women were trained on how to raise, progressive young people, or if they were able to raise developmental children. It will be a good thing. So these are some of the issues, the absence of Black men, in their family household. The fact that, as I said, we've got women. I mean, we were having a conversation earlier on. If you look at South African Black men today, how many of them, beyond being emasculated, they are so emotional. And one understands, they will tell you that they are depressed. They will tell you, I want my peace. So you cannot even get protection from a Black man. So I'm just saying
You're arguing that South African Black men have been feminized. Is that what you mean by emotional?
Because the majority of them are raised by women. And over and above. That's why it becomes, and this thing, I don't know if we've discussed it before. If you look at some of the documents from the colonial era on how to destroy a Black family, you find, pointers where they speak about emasculating the Black man, isolating the Black man from the family. So what you have now...
How to make a slave.
Oh, yes.
Willie Lynch.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you have now is you have, more women in middle management positions, more women being very masculine. And we are dealing with men who are feminized. So it becomes very difficult because now no one speaks about how do you then, or how are these children raised in the absence of a Black man who understands himself, who understands his role in society, So we need to look at all these things from a holistic perspective, because the society that we have has been designed. Now, how do we go back and redesign? How do we deconstruct this society so that we are able to speak of some of these pointers that you are raising? Because
you're saying it's deeper than just succession.
Oh, it's deeper than just succession. A couple of years ago, I used to write a lot about the emasculation of Black men until I got tired, because I was, and I still am sympathetic to our Black men, but I always say, there's comfort in victimhood. Until when do our Black men rise and know that they must lead communities, that they must be their brothers' keepers, that they must be their sisters' keepers? So for me, I would also want to take it back to say, of course, Black men, you are on your own, but we really need to start organizing ourselves. So we need to do what the Buddha Bond did before 1910, because before, they took power in 1910, they organized themselves, a few of them. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to have conversations with churches, because churches are at the epicenter of our communities, but many of them are taking money from the poor. So they're not playing the developmental role that they used to play previously. But I think it's so incumbent on Black men to start looking at the mirror and to see, because at times I realize that we are the women that Black men have created, because you say we are angry, but we are what what Black men have created. We are a mirror of what Black men have created, because it's also not easy to raise children. It's not easy to wake up every morning, to work. other communities you find with Indians and other races, women are chilled. Women do not work as hard. They raise children. They are priorities to raise children. So with us, we have to work hard, and no one understands that. So I'm hoping that, through our movement, would be able to start having these conversations. But, you once asked something, do I now think that Black people can be saved? It's becoming difficult for me and blurry.
You used to have a strong answer before.
Oh,
the
yes.
answer was yes.
Of course.
Now it's getting blurry.
It's becoming blurry because now it's becoming blurry. I now start thinking of saving myself, because I feel the more you try to save Black people, and you mentioned Muammar Gaddafi, your Sankara and many other people, they died. And look at our generation. I was even thinking of Sarah Baartman, that she was humiliated in Europe. And look at a typical South African woman today, how we objectify ourselves, how we sexualize ourselves. So for me, these are contradictions, of course. Yeah. And when you really, really look hard, you're like, maybe there's nothing that I can do. I can just do the limit, I can just do the bare minimum, but there's absolutely nothing that I can do. Maybe the next generation will try to change, the face of Black culture, Black communities, but we cannot save.
You've paid your dues and you're tired.
Yeah.
Apparently, they're going to be making a movie about Sarah Baartman. I'm not sure. And I remember seeing, I'm not sure what visual it was, where it was Black women who had BBLs, who were twerking on a stage. And I found myself asking, I wonder, we're told that Sarah Baartman wasn't overseas by choice. And it's a very sad, tragic story of objectification. And I found myself asking, like Kanye West, was she really a victim? What if someone were to flip the story and say, what you see girls doing today, twerking on stages for money? Or that lady saw an opportunity to do the same. It's just she was the first one. And because she maybe died poor, sick or whatever, it became a victim story. I'm not saying that's the case, but it looks bad today that what we feel sad about her for, women are doing freely now or for money. The examples, even though they're well off and they're famous, Nicky Oppenheimer, while still alive, is grooming his son, Jonathan Oppenheimer. Johan Rupert, his son, is sitting on some of his boards now as a proxy. Yanni Mouton, same, his son is also sitting on boards. And shout out to Patrice Motsepe, man. Utlopi, outside of running Sundowns, I'm hoping he's also being groomed in various ways. And I'm not sure to what extent, sadly, because I'm not that deeply linked, even though I've been seen with them. Uzuma's brought his son Ututuzane closer to him and his daughter Ututuzile. I hope he's grooming them, whether it's to run MK or just to understand the struggle or to understand how the world works, I'm not sure, but I appreciate those examples. I think Ramaphosa has also placed his sons in good positions, Andile, Notumelo, and anyone else. And I hope we can learn from them. I don't know if it's succession planning, but the idea of while I'm still alive, can I please groom you? I don't know if Uzwelithini, while he was alive, was taking his sons to meetings and gatherings and delegations to make sure that they understand what a king does. But that stuff needs to be done. And you're raising something very important, which is a conversation we're all meant to be having. We speak about men's conferences. How do we ensure we save the man? And for me, it used to be the Black man. Today, it's just the broken man, because I'm seeing more and more men from other races that are also struggling. A clip of mine trended from this platform, Konvo, where a lady asked me, it was through a Q&A online, which religious group do I think would be the best in South Africa? And I said, I think for Black men, it would be Islam. And I explained why. The women are still submissive. They're raised a certain way. Black men claim they like polygamy. And in Islam, you're allowed up to 4 wives if you can take care of them, etc., etc. Later on, other people would be like, please look into church groups like the ZCC. Please look into groups like Shembe. And not only speak about the Muslims and the Jews as an example. There are criticisms today about the Shembe church and some of the men marrying young girls. That can maybe be discussed on another platform. But the idea of having a community where men are leading, men are husbands, men are fathers, men are providing. I think if we can get more men to be on platforms and to teach broken men, maybe, how they got it right, hopefully something can change. And in that conversation, I'm not sure how, but I hope men, this is to men now, we can find a way to mastermind our women. Because the thing that you're very correct about is we're angry at you guys. Yes, you can blame the white man and the system, but that's your fight. That's what you should be fighting so that you can come back a good man for me. But what I'm seeing now is a guy that disappeared, wasn't providing, got other women pregnant somewhere else. And I was forced to go and work. And now you blame me for being independent and strong and angry. But I saw you leave me. I didn't see a white man leave me. I saw you leave me. So how do we come together and mastermind our women so that we can go back to a place where we're working together? Mm-hmm. How that comes about, I'm not sure, but that's going to be the challenge for us as Amachita. Does it mean we all join Ushembe or we join Islam?
Or just become polygamist, continue exploiting and oppressing us? I do not think...
polygamy was just an example.
I know. I do not think polygamy... I think it's it's part of, a capitalist mode of controlling women. Of course, yes, there are families who do it well. But when you look at, especially when the man dies, what happens to the family? But I do not want to necessarily question polygamy. But what I also wanted to speak to, and in closing, you mentioned President Zuma when you mentioned the Oppenheimers, when you mentioned Rupert. What about the people? Where are the people? It shows you that this is, politics is also an opium. Of course, politicians are grooming their kids to take over, but they're not teaching ordinary people about the game because the game is rigged, but no one is teaching people about the real game. The elites, they do not even want government intervention. They hate government. They hate
politics. They'd have as little government as possible.
So the expectation is that those who claim they love black people, they should be teaching black people on how to learn the game, the game of life. But they're not doing that. They're teaching their children. Correct. That's why I always say that there's no politician who's going to come and save you. The least that you can do, and maybe what we can do, just ensure people read Napoleon Hill, they just read books. You spoke about mastering the self, I think for me, that's what needs to happen because politicians do not have the interest of ordinary people at heart. So their succession, their continuation, it's primarily for themselves and for their children. And of course, I love, black men. I want to see black men succeeding. But black men, as I said, should look at the mirror and how they've also hurt us and how they've harmed us. To sleep with a woman and you leave them and you don't call them and you don't think about them. You can imagine. You can imagine what happens when that woman has to meet another man. So there are many issues which are at play. And maybe you should have, as I said, and as I always advise, have conversations between men and women so that there could be some sort of a synergy. But it's going to be difficult when we sexualize ourselves, when we objectify ourselves. Hard work is no longer popular. You just want to go on Instagram, show your butt, do your BBL. Women do not want to work hard. We do not see CEOs, female CEOs. We do not see women who work hard. What we see are women who bleach, who do BBLs. For me, it's a serious indictment because there are good women out there who work really, really hard, but we don't know them. All we see are these women who are prepared to do anything for money.
Phapano Phasha, thank you so much for coming through. And let's hope we'll do this again soon. Jeez. Black men, you are on your own. Dollar the things, boy. Catch a wake up. I guess we have to cut. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.